Okay, so now moving right along. We made it to the next section. I'm going to combine these next two sections because they're more of an introductory and not really about coding yet, writing any code. So it's more reading for these next two sections. So I'm going to combine these two together to help us get through this so we can get back into writing some code, and I can spend some more time in another section where I might have to make 2, maybe 3 videos. So here, let us get into the curriculum. Again, if you're new to this channel, if you like to follow along, the curriculum is free. The link is in the description, and it doesn't cost you anything, and you don't have to register for it. Okay, so let's get into it. Why use anonymous functions? At this point, you may be asking yourself, why am I learning anonymous functions? They seem strange, and their ability and the utility may not be immediately obvious. While the opinions of programmers differ, there are 2 main reasons why we think anonymous functions are important to understand. Anonymous functions can be single use. There are many situations in which you will need to create a function that will only be used once. To see this, recall one of our earlier examples. The anonymous function created in the example cannot be used outside of set timeout. So this is only of local scope. This is only for this particular function. And sometimes you will write these type of function. You may write a set timeout function to help make your code work. Now, defining an anonymous function at the same time it is passed as an argument prevents it from being used elsewhere in the program. Additionally, in programs that use lots of functions such as web applications, as you will soon learn, defining functions anonymously and directly with the function call can reduce the number of names you need to create. Anonymous functions are ubiquitous in JavaScript. JavaScript programmers use anonymous functions a lot. Many programmers use anonymous functions with the same gusto as that friend of yours who puts hot sauce on everything. Just because an anonymous function isn't needed to solve a problem doesn't mean that it shouldn't be used to solve the problem. Avoiding JavaScript code that uses anonymous function is impossible. Any programming problem in JavaScript can be solved without using anonymous functions. Thus, the extent to which you use them in your code, in your own code, is somewhat a matter of taste. We will take the middle road throughout the rest of this course, regularly using both anonymous and named functions. Check your understanding. We want you to explain the difference between named and anonymous functions, including examples of how an anonymous function can be used. Make sure you do this. This is just going to help you and reinforce what you've learned. All right, so now we're introducing recursion. So the quick review in the previous chapter, we learned how to define a function and its parameters. Here we go. Function add two numbers, add two numbers, add two number, num as a parameter, and here's our logic. Num plus equal 2. So this is a compound operator. Then we console.log add two number. So we're just adding the number 2 to 12, and that gives us 14. So we're passing the argument 12, and we're just adding 2 to it. Now play around with this. How can I write this the long way? Go ahead and try it. Now when called, the parameters num is passed an argument, which in this case is the number 12. The function executes and returns the value 14, which the console.log statement prints. Functions can call other functions. function should only accomplish one preferably simple task. To solve more complicated tasks, one small function must call other functions, like this. We have a helper function here, and we're calling that helper function inside of another function, which says add 5 to the number, and we're passing a parameter called value. This time we're calling our function, or we're invoking our function inside of a function which is being stored into a variable. So what is it telling me here? Whatever the argument for value is, which is add 2 to the number, I want to also add 3 to that. So if add 5 to the number and I'm getting a value, what is my result supposed to be? So in result, I'm adding 2. I'm still adding this function up here, which I'm passing in that same parameter value plus 2, which will give me 5. And then I want to return the results. And then when I add 5 to the number 12, it becomes 17. A lot to do there. Could have made it just simpler, just do the same thing here. But it's just showing you how you can use helper functions and use functions within a function. Of course, there is no need to write a function to add 5 to a value, but the example demonstrates calling a function from within another function. What is recursion? In programming, the divide and conquer strategy solves the problem by breaking it down into smaller, simpler pieces. If these pieces can all be solved in exactly the same way, then we gain an additional advantage. Solving the big problem becomes a process of completing and combining the smaller parts. This is why we say create small chunks. Get something working and keep it working. And if you can break it down into smaller pieces, it just makes it easier for you to debug and to find your problems if there is a problem. Splitting up a large task into smaller tasks, or smaller, that's what we call refactoring. Identical pieces allow us to reuse a single function rather than coding several different functions. We accomplish this by either 1. Setting up a loop to call one function lots of times, or building a function that splits up the large problem for us until a simplest case is found and solved. Recursion is the process of solving a larger problem by breaking it into smaller pieces that can all be solved in exactly the same way. The clever idea behind recursion is that instead of using a loop, a function simply calls itself over and over again, which with each step reducing the size of the problem. Through recursion, a problem eventually gets reduced to a very simple task, which can be immediately solved. This small answer sets up the solution for the previous step, which is solves the next bigger step. Properly built, the function combines all of the small answers to solve the original problem. Many new programmers, and even veteran ones, find recursion an abstract and tricky concept. One helpful way to approach the idea is to walk through an example. So that's the end of this section. So we combined the two sections. Now we're going to get ready to dig into recursion. Yes, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't use or shy away from. I can use it either or. It doesn't matter to me. I can do it recursively, or I can just write regular functions and not have to call them over and over again. But if you learn how to use recursion and recursive function, it just makes your code even more efficient. So that's, or proficient. So that's what you may be looking for. So that's the end of this section. See you in the next section. And remember, the more you do, the more you improve.